living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Oh no, I must be running behind. The cigar isn't lit yet. Oh, this is not going to work. We have to light the cigar. Oh, my. What a silly affectation it is. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Michael Storm. It is Toward Anarchy. That means it's 1 p.m. somewhere in the world, at least in the middle of America it is. 1 p.m. Central Time. I do this every weekend right here live on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Come together, you, me, and sometimes a guest, sometimes not. Amazing guest today. We'll talk about that coming up. But we just get together and we have a little conversation. We talk about some of the things that are going on in the world, some of the things that interest me. Sometimes I invite you into the conversation. Most of the time I don't. This is my platform. We decided that early on, that this was my platform, that this was my space to come here and talk about my things, and that if you want to talk about your things outside of what I invite you into, that you should go find your own platform. And it's great because I say that, and then I tell you, I present you with people, with a show, with ideas and successful tools and things that prove that you can actually do that if you want to do that. If you want to carve out a niche for yourself on the internet, a space for yourself out there, and I suggest that you do. I shared. It's a running theme. Just the idea of what goes on behind the scenes and keeping everything up and running and what's involved in it, and it's all just part of this proof that you actually can. There are 8 billion people on the planet, whatever it is. You can still carve out a space for yourself and be heard, and you can say the things that are important to you, or you can do what the popular people do, which is say the things that they think are important to other people. There's a difference. There's a huge difference, and there's a difference in the way people will receive that. I think that one of the reasons that the show has any success at all is just the fact that I'm just open and honest about it. This is just me. There's no pretense of anything, and I'm not here to sell you anything. And the name Toward Anarchy, the website towardanarchy.com, grabbing up all of these spaces, that's just my niche. That's just the thing. We can talk about all those words and the importance of them and what they mean, and that's why I like to do this. I think that what we're seeing that dystopian reality, that dystopian nightmare picture that's been painted throughout art and history, becoming much more of a reality as we get. It's the craziest thing is we just slip into this technological nightmare, this future that's been totally predicted about drugging people up one way or another or both ways, poisoning them through the food, the air, the water, through injections, through through the television, through the mind control, through the public school system, the whole thing. It's been spelled out for, and that's what. When it comes down to it, when I look at everything that I see around, and as smart as I am, as dumb as I am, the things that I know, the things that I don't know, and I look at the world, and I look at certain people and certain behavior, and I think to myself, I just don't understand that. When of course I do. I can analyze it and logic it and do all that, but I still don't understand why that person does it. I don't get what need it fulfills within them when I see it as being completely counterproductive to being a happy, successful individual. Though that would be the thing that would blow my mind. Whatever it is, you can take whatever's in your mind and picture it and play it on there, whether it's statism or whether it's some weird religion that you aren't a part of and yours is fine, whatever. Whatever it is, just imagine that in that place and the way people respond to it and react to it oftentimes are very sycophantic, apologetic toward it, whatever it is. It's hard for someone like myself to look at and try to imagine it, because then I start thinking about, well, how come if I can sit here and look at this and I can see this and I can see the danger and the detriment, and I can even take you, if you have to, if you need to have it, and point you to some authority, somebody else other than myself who says these things and thinks about these things and supposedly knows more about them than I do. Fine. Absolutely great. That's that whole idea of planting the seeds and somebody find some of that information on their own. But I get the feeling that so many people have to be drug kicking and screaming, and that's one of the things that this is really about, because I spent this whole show, the whole Toward Anarchy thing, I spent years doing this. If you follow the page on Facebook, if you look at the information about the page, you'll see that it's been around since 2015. So that's 6 years. That's how long ago. And I think I grabbed the group. I have both the page and the group Toward Anarchy, and I think I grabbed the group even sooner than that. I want to say 13. Could be. I don't know. I could click on it and look. But the point is that I've been thinking about this for a long time and looking to find a place and meaning for some of these things. And one of the things that I did throughout those years is I worked with Cop Block, and I was on the street for some street actions, various things from 9/11 to the banking to elections. We did the Pepsi challenge. It's Pepsi in both cans, and pick one. It's the same no matter which one you pick. We had all sorts of fun reaching all sorts of people in different walks of life and in different ways, and the beginnings of this show, originating on the network, were born out of that. And to come back here all these years later and have it so much more refined and so much more directed. I found these cards the other day. Are they right here? Maybe not. They might be right there. I'm back in my studio. I had moved out of my studio over the last year, and because we gave it over to my wife so that she could host her classroom. And she would have all the space and the quiet and everything that she needed. And I'm back in here now, and so I'm looking. Hopefully everything goes well and works like it's supposed to, because that's the way it is when you move a bunch of technology and things around. But everything seems to be fine so far. But I'm just looking around and thinking about that. And one of the things that I found when I was moving around, they weren't lost. They just were over there and not over there, or over there, whatever. And they were cards, they're business cards, and I've had some printed for each iteration of this show. And the first one was Mile High Liberty Radio, and that was back, I don't know, 7 years ago. It's got to be more than that now. It's considerably more than that now. I don't even know. It's a decade, upwards of that, somewhere in there. But at any rate, it was Mile High Liberty Radio, and I had business cards, and I give out business cards and try to attract some people. They're cheap. They're an easy way to just put your name on something and hand it to somebody, whether they're interested in what's on the card or whether what you have to, somebody's always asked, do you have a card? I'm constantly asked if I have a card. Yes, I do. It's in my pocket. And then there was another one. There was one for when I moved here back to Kansas. I started the network, Waking America Radio Network, WARN, and ran that for a year, and it was fine. It was too much work, though. I just want to be a host. I don't want all of that responsibility. I want to deal with that commercials and customers and clients, and I don't want to deal with any of that. I just want to host a show. And I found that out real quick. and that was a few years back. And then and all along this time, I looked at, oh, where's this place? Where's this thing? And one of the other things that I did during that time was writing for Cop Block, and one of the things that they wanted me to do was to cover this sort of headline. And when you do that, and I didn't want to do that. I would just write. If I was going to write, I wanted to write about experience in generally the same way I speak. And they wanted me to concentrate on the stories with the police involved, as opposed to, I don't know. It's my writing's the same no matter what, and it's a lot like I speak in terms of what I'm talking about and the things that are interesting to me. So this conversation that we have here, there's always that potential to be talking about the police and that portion of it, and what happens with that constant interference of the state and all that. And what happened to me was I would just see these stories constantly. I can't do it. It makes me sad. It makes me angry. It makes me really, really angry. And it makes me, because I feel hopeless. There's nothing that I can do about it. And all I see is these bullies, these scum, just picking on people and then making excuses about it and murdering them and getting away with it. And it just over and over and over again. Or even, that's just the 1,000+ times a year that they actually kill somebody, and the few times out of that it actually makes the news. They harass and abuse and violate people every single minute of every day all across the nation here. It never makes the news, and nothing is ever done about it. We're constantly violated by the state and its enforcers. And so I wanted to stop people, because this is what brought the conversation to this, is, how do people come here? Where do they find their anarchy? Where do they find their voluntarism? Where do they get the idea that authority is this illusion that it is? And a lot of times it's because of that hard-headedness, that unwillingness to see something for what it is, or clinging to a belief in something. It's that diametrically opposed ideas contained within your head that just it cause you some great pain if you don't let them go. And you may not even know it. That's the weird thing about it. A lot of times, slow graduated pain like that, you just live with it your whole life. It's like back pain, it's like knee pain, people that get old. It's the same thing with your brain too. It works the same way. And these things, these concepts that you hold contrary in your mind eventually catch up with you. To some people it causes schizophrenia, and there's no question about it. But the idea was, if I could find some place in between, a space in between that person who's totally, who just gets it. With every situation, they apply the same general principles of logic and letting other people be who they are and not enslaving them and not wanting to be enslaved. That anarchy. And the person who is just a statist, somebody who is just the opposite of that, and it leaves all decisions up to those around them, and really is just sort of walking through life in a daze until some authoritarian drags them or someone they love out of a car, beats the hell out of them for no reason, a violation of nothing, a damn Christmas tree, one of those air fresheners hanging from the mirror and kills you for it. Somebody figures it out, right? Eventually at that point. I wanted to find that space that's somewhere in between those, because they suck. And I've been there. I've been violated by the state so many times, it's not even funny. They just that's all they do. Any time I've ever encountered the state outside of one case where I actually violated somebody and their property in retaliation for them doing something to me. This is stupid kid stuff back and forth. But it was actually, there was some validity to any claim, and that was such a long time ago that they actually stuck to the validity of the claim, and that I was able to go into court myself without a lawyer and say, look, this claim is not, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true, this is true, I accept that I did this, I'll pay for this, and I'll pay for the damages to the car, and walked out of the court. I paid the damages, and that was it. That was, that was 25 years ago or so, and gosh, it must be more than that now. It must be 30 something. I'm getting older. And then to run up against the state here within recent years, and it be so much different, so much harder to be not guilty of the things that they say, and they just pile it on, and they're just such thugs. They're just such thugs. They, even in situations where there's nobody's harmed, nothing, there's no damage to any property. There's just a claim, and there's no validity to the claim. They accept one version of a claim, and they go and they will kill the other person on behalf of someone who made a claim. And they will blame it on that person instead of them actually just doing work and finding out that a validity of a claim and making those people take their counterclaims to court if that's what's necessary. They certainly don't need to be getting involved like they constantly do, like most people encountered them with no victim, with no actual crime, with just the state suggesting that it has the authority to rob, cage, murder, rape the rest of us, live off of us, feed off of us, and continue this vicious growing cycle. As we respond to it and fight back against it, they double down. That's what happens. Just a quick side note. In that same vein of thinking while we're on the brain and what it does, somebody asked me earlier this week about QAnon and, is that still going on? And people are still believing that stuff, and they couldn't believe that there's still some out there. And psychology tells us that people like that, people, statists, Qists, whatever it is, whatever religion, if you will, that they've grasped so hard onto, that they don't let that stuff go. They double down on it. They justify it. That's the thing. And when it comes to the state and its authority, it's an endless string, an endless of excuse after excuse after excuse for doing those things: robbing, caging, murdering, raping. I throw raping in there because it's just such a thing so often. These politicians and these people in power, and there's something wrong with them, I guess, while we're on the brain. Some of them just need to smoke a bowl and chill the hell out. Dr. Bob, man, I wish I could get that guy. He keeps saying yes, but he never nails anything down. He just knows so much about the endocannabinoid system and what it does to the brain and the deficiency and the type of person that develops when they have that deficiency within their system. And it'd be great to have that conversation. Speaking of doctors, Dr. Bob is great, but Dr. Joye is on the show today. She's coming up in 15 minutes, not quite that long. She's an author, and she's a musician, and she's a real doctor. She's worked with the handicapped, helping them rehabilitate both their minds and their bodies. And she has this ridiculously huge, this wide range of knowledge that I just can't wait to tap into. Today we'll talk about visitors, alien technology, disclosure, UFOs, all these things that I've been hinting about over the weeks, and they keep popping up in the news. And it was there again. Wasn't with the Chinese space agency on their Twitter account. I don't know if it was real or not. I didn't go and look because I just saw it just not too long ago before the beginning of the show. But they announced, they said, "Oh, we can prove that there's life out there," or something along those lines. We'll talk to Dr. Joye here in about 10 minutes coming up here on Toward Anarchy. Go to towardanarchy.com to follow along. We'll be right back. Okay, as always, the best way to follow along is to go to towardanarchy.com And right there on the front page, if you're live with me in real time, it'll be right there. You'll see it says April 25th. It's one of the first words right there. Near the top of the page, you'll see Dr. Joye is my guest. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to a page where there's some links. And I always share this information, share some information from or for about my guest, as well as some other things that I just happened to come across during the week. And if I found it interesting, and you just never know, it's interesting because this was one of these last-minute things. One of the links that I shared today was this PBS Looks at the Arts and how racism pushed Tina Turner and other black artists out of America. And that was really neat. The link is there for you to read. It's just an interesting taste of what goes on in elitist circles in general, but they talk about these black performers over a period of time and some of the struggles and where they found success in getting out of America and into other places where they're huge, they're big, they're as big as any white artist, as big as any of them are in America in some of these other places, and it happens. I mean, it's a big world outside of America. Why shouldn't it happen that way? But it speaks to more than that. It really does speak to about some of this idea of systemic racism and things that have happened over, in particular, industries until something has been addressed. I mean, it really never changes. That's the truth of it, that it's all about these people in power and how good or bad they are at. They have to live the life. I'm trying to say a couple of things at once here. They have to live the life by an example, but as somebody who's employing other people, whether it's in creative pursuits or just business in general, whatever it is, they also have to be able to hire those people around them and surround them with them, and so that those things don't become a problem. Because I don't think most people particularly care whether a person is black. We're talking about Tina Turner. She's a singer, right? So you'd think that you would just turn the music on and let it play for somebody, and they would either like it or they wouldn't, and that would be what you would base it on, and you deal with the rest of it. But it's never been that way. There's always been a look. There's always been a show. There's a presentation for the most popular, for the big, and of course that is perceived and real expectations of the audience as well as the people who produce it. But there's a lot more to it. I might talk about it a little bit later, because it was a great little article, and there's this documentary, I think it's on HBO and Hulu, that is I keep seeing it pop up. It's about her and Ike, and I think it's mostly about her, but of course that involves Ike. And she's about to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame again for the second time. That doesn't happen to too many people, very few, let alone black female artists. So it's pretty neat. There's a great little article there, and that's the kind of stuff I'm prone to sharing. Right above that, dismissing the growing number of deaths and injuries. That's the CDC. Surrounding COVID-19 vaccines, and it's interesting watching the numbers, because of course there's going to be some greater reporting of them. It must be more than is normally reported because there's a larger use of them, but in a very short period of time we've already seen as many adverse reactions as you would find throughout the year reported. And that's considered a small number, that yearly reported number. An independent source has looked at those numbers and suggested that the reporting to VAERS is very small, that almost nothing is attributed to vaccine injury for so many reasons. There's a list of them. There's a link there. TowardAnarchy.com. Like, share, follow, subscribe wherever you're at, whatever platform you're on. Share those links. Try to make it as easy as possible. That page, if you go to TowardAnarchy.com, if you click on April 25th or otherwise, click into the archive. It's it's April of 2021. April 25th will be right up there, in there somewhere in that time, and all the information will still be there as long as I've done it right, and apparently I have this time. Everything seems to work, and it doesn't always. Sometimes I have to fix some things. So you can see if you go there, towardanarchy.com, April 25th, that Dr. Joye is my guest, and we will talk to her next about disclosure and UFOs and aliens and so forth and so on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com. Look for April 25th if you have to go through the archive. It's there, the page. I did it myself. I walked through it because it's always funny when I do that to myself. If I talk about it and I start to walk through it and I realize, oh, in real time, it's not actually there. It's always there by the time you would get to it if you're listening to it later, any other time than live. But it's just kind of funny when I trip myself up doing it. So I try not to do it. I try to make sure it's there. It's right in place. If you can't get to it from that front page, you just go into the archive, and you'll find interesting things like this. Of course, you find information, links to my guest. Dr. Joye will be joining us here. Hopefully, Sam will let us know when he gets connected on the phone. Okay. Oh, perfect. Well, then we will introduce her into the conversation in just a second here. I will tell you about her, and as always, I share some links. That was what I was getting at, but I also shared this thing with you. This is just one of these things that came across Twitter, and it felt true to me, even if the use of "they've got" just annoys me. They've got. Got is such a useless word. I'm guilty of using it myself. They have you. You don't need the got. Okay, so they've got you fearing for your lives. They've got you afraid to travel. They've got you afraid to see your own family. They've got you snitching on your neighbors. They've got you getting fat, lazy, and docile in front of the TV. They've got you isolated. They've got you. And I just said that rang true to me when I read it. If you're at towardanarchy.com, look for April 25th. You'll find Dr. Joye as my guest. You'll see I've shared a link to her website. You can follow along, follow her there. And you can support her by purchasing a book. I gave you a direct link there to her collection of books. She's an author. She's a musician. She has an album that you can purchase as well. She's worked with the handicapped, her life strengthening both their minds and their bodies. And she has, as I said before, just this insane range of knowledge of topics and interesting things that we could discuss. And when she reached out, it was, oh, yeah, we definitely have to have Dr. Joye on the show. So it's my pleasure to speak to you, Dr. Joye. Thank you so much for taking some time to come and hang out with me.
Oh, listen, Michael, I was tickled when you sent back and said that you would allow me to be your guest, because I look so forward to being able to share the research that I've been doing for a very long time, and I just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share it with your listeners today.
Well, I think it's great what you're doing. I've read the information that you've sent me and looked over the website a little bit, and it's wow. It's just a mind-blowing. Just you are here, there, and everywhere, and so it's great to have someone like yourself on. For one, I've been talking about, in particular, one of the topics that we'll get into, the disclosure. I've been talking about it for a while, but I don't personally know anybody that really is knowledgeable on the subject. And so all of a sudden, with this, all of this talk of disclosure in the news, and this Harvard professor talking about this space junk being, spacecraft from the past, and all these things that have been out in the news lately, I had to have this conversation. So when you reached out and had some knowledge on it, I was, oh yes, we got to do that. But then I'm looking through the rest of it, and you mentioned in there this book that you've written about the Shroud of Turin, and you mentioned about DNA, and boy, the first thing that pops into my mind is they're going to clone DNA from the Shroud of Turin. Isn't that like exactly how you get the Antichrist? I mean, isn't that the formula?
Yes, it is. And I spent a lot of years doing this research. The Shroud of Turin is a very unique cloth, and it's been with us really since the day that Jesus Christ resurrected through it. It's amazing how it's traveled through history, and I spent years writing that travel through history in a book that's got 2 volumes called Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666. But I traced when that shroud came into existence there in the tomb with Jesus, And then the face napkin that was there as well in the tomb with him, where that ended up as far as the Vita Spain, it's still there. It's been there since 500 A.D. The blood, everything, it matches identical to the shroud. The Holy Shroud of Turin is what it's called. And it is an amazing thing when you see the amount of research that's been done on this particular cloth. In fact, it is the most researched relic in all of human history. So we're talking about something that's not conspiracy theory. We're talking about a real cloth that has had major forensic type science, biological sciences, the linen people, the people who do all kinds of things that you can even imagine, physics, everything, trying to figure out how that image came to be on that cloth. And I've been writing about this since like 1999. So it's amazing to me because every day I get new information about this cloth and how really miraculous that it really is.
That's really great. It's one of those interesting conversations because it is, like you said, the fact that it's been through so many hands and so many people have had sort of a thread here and a look under a microscope there, and there's still so much mystery and misunderstanding about it. So yeah, that's really great. And so then you come across then, I guess, this idea. We'll get into those. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Where are you coming from? And how you even end up in the pursuit of something like that?
Well, you know, I have a very, very varied background. I have been really doing a lot of research since I had a strange little dream when I was 6 years old that I felt like I really saw something like the end of time. And so throughout my life, from that time on, I was always, you know, looking for answers to a lot of questions that I had as a child that really I could not find answers to. I was told things like, you know, it's not time for us to know, this, that, and the other. And so I began reading back in, I guess when I was 13 years old. The book of Revelation was something that I really kind of dove into, and for the first time I saw some of the things that I really realized would happen to me in that dream. And so then I picked up a book called Hal Lindsey's Great Lake Planet Earth, and that just really opened my eyes to the fact that I had seen something that I felt like I needed to take time to know about. That dream had stuck with me for that length of time, and it's still with me today. So throughout my years of college, I went on and got my associate in science. I was thinking about being an attorney at that time, and then I changed into education and got my 4-year degree and my 5-year degree and my master's in psychology, guidance, and counseling because I was so interested in knowing the process of how the body works, the human anatomy of the body, how we think and what we do. And then from that aspect, I went on and got my doctorate in education as well. And the intent was to teach me how to do in-depth research and how to write in-depth research and do it the right way, not a conspiracy way, not, just throw it out there. I wanted to really be able to look at documents and look at real serious science and be able to put these pieces of the puzzle together because I was looking for the answers myself. And so what happened in me trying to answer the questions that I feel like a lot of people have and have been, I guess, put off in churches and different places, I decided I'm going to find the answers. This is just that important to me. I have a mind I really think my father wanted me to be an attorney because I love the research. I want to know. And so when I present something to you in my work and all of my books, it is almost like I'm presenting it before a judge and a jury. Here's the information. Here's what I have found. This is what I truly believe is going on. So it's not something to fake anybody out. It's not a book or books written just for the topics or whatever. These are things that I felt like that the mainstream in society want to know, but they're not willing to ask the questions and then do the research. So I have really done the research in these books, and then I present it to you to really look at it and go, I never thought of that, because I want you to take the next step and start trying to find these kinds of answers as well. And it's a wonderful thing because once you start doing the research, what happens, you find that every field of study, and that's one thing that what you're talking about, I'm so broad. My interests are everything from ancient history to physics to astrology to nanotechnology to the viruses to, the UFO phenomenon, aliens. I mean, there's not an area of study that I have not studied. And the reason being is because to see the bigger picture of how the Creator sees everything, You know, they don't see, like we're taught in school, like the field of study, and you've got blinders on and all you know is about physics. You've got to be able to look at, this is in physics, this is in nanotechnology, this is in biotechnology, this is in GMO products. You've got to be able to see the whole picture. So I bring all these different disciplines into my research to literally show that science is proving what Scripture has told us all along is going to happen. In other words, where it used to be that science was out here, left field, and the Bible was out here in right field, and there was no connection to them, what we have found and what I have done and the research that I've done is that when we were told that the Bible, you know, really was just a bunch of books put together, didn't really have any meaning, that kind of thing, now science has gotten so perfected that it's literally proving where people were saying, oh, well, that's just symbolic or that's just so-and-so. We now have proof. It's like in the archaeological records. When I was growing up as a young girl, they said, you know, there's places that are mentioned in the Bible that didn't exist. Well, now because of our satellite capability and our ground capability and our ability to analyze and to dig, we have now found ancient cities that were mentioned in biblical scripture. We have found, you know, books of the Bible, and we found another set of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There is just all these aspects of science that I keep bringing in, and literally it is proving everything that Scripture has said. So it's quite amazing. So my work is really, you know, if you like physics, if you like you know, astrology, if you like astronomy, if you like biotechnology, if you like things about cloning, if you like things about the paranormal, I mean, all of that's included in my work, and it's a scientific thing. In other words, it's not just me throwing the information out there. My work has a bibliography. It has the books that I have used, and I tell you, I try to just really scrutinize everything that I look at, because this day and time you have to be so careful about people telling lies to make profit. And I came up at a time when if somebody messed up in a book, it was just because they kind of messed up and really didn't mean to. This day and time, people make money off of changing things around. So my bibliographies tell you the books, and inside the book, instead of you having to go to footnotes and back to another page or something, I list everything. So when you're reading, I'm giving you the scriptures, I'm telling you where they're at, I'm giving you the books, I'm telling you where I got it from, who said what, so that you can follow along without having to go get anything else. In other words, I want you to focus, when you read my work, directly on what I'm telling you. And it's really very detailed. I mean, I have a good friend who says, you know, I read it, and I have to go back and read it. She says, I'll read a paragraph, go back and read another paragraph, go back and read that paragraph again. She says, because there's so much information that you need, because I'm going to build you from one point all the way up to the top of the pyramid so that you get the whole process of all the information together. So it's really been a lot of years of reading and doing research, a lot of being alone with a book, you know, at 3 and 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, where you didn't have telephones ringing or any other responsibility, that you could literally focus on the enormity of research that I bring in the work that I do. And I feel like it's important, especially now, because when I first started talking about these subjects, a lot of people were like, oh, I don't believe that. I had doctors that I dealt with. They'd say, well, no, cloning is not possible. And now cloning is one of the easiest things you can do in a laboratory in a high school. So it's an easy process. So there's just a lot of things that in time, people who have laughed have called back and said, you know, Joy, I'm real sorry about laughing at you about 10 years ago, because I want to know an answer to a question right now that I think that you may already have known back 10 years ago. So it is fulfilling, but at the same time, it's allowing me to take something that people don't really know the answers to and try to give them subject matter to answer it. I mean, I was a child when I would ask why, and somebody would say, well, I don't know. That always bothered me. Or it's not for you to know, or just leave it alone, or can you just be quiet for 10 minutes? I really take the breath to ask a question because I really want to know the answer. And so my mother laughed and said when I was born, that was the first thing out of my mouth was why, because I could ask a million questions. But I feel like unless you ask the tough questions, you are not going to seek to find those answers. And to me, the way that we live our lives just sometimes not caring or not being concerned, we're missing the whole aspect of why we're here, and that every choice and everything we have made, there is a rhyme and reason behind it. It is not like we are grains of sand just floating in the atmosphere. I mean, I literally take the science and prove that when that sperm hits that egg and there is energy created, that the law of thermodynamics tells us at that point you are created. That energy can never be destroyed. Once it's made, it's never destroyed. I mean, so I take the science and help you understand what's happening. And then because I've had that science and that science background that I've brought into religion, that so many people, in fact, the first person I had do a book for me was like, really? We've got to put it in the genre of science and religion? Nobody's ever done that before. And I'm like, this is important, because for the first time, people can see it, feel it, understand it, not just, I guess it's kind of like this. I had people in my life that were very special to me that have gone on, that I felt like they were like Thomas. When the other disciples had seen Jesus alive, and they told him they had seen Jesus alive, he said, I'm not going to believe that until I see him with those nail prints in his hands. This is what my research is doing. It's taking you past just having the faith. It's taking you into the science to prove what it said. So for all the doubting Thomases out there, these books really, really bring it down to a level that you can really see it and feel it and get the whole aspect of it. And I think that it helps a lot of people who have a lot of questions that would be sucked down the rabbit hole in other New Age kinds of things. If you can't find it in religion, many times a lot of people that I grew up with, and even myself, you know, I couldn't find these answers. So I'm like, well, there's an answer to this somewhere. But the problem is that, you know, Satan's got his little bit of information that's quite entertaining, and he can sure drag you under if you allow him to take a hold of you, because he'll just keep on. Once he gets you started in that direction, he's going to keep carrying you in that direction. So, you know, I'm willing to talk about the tough things. I'm willing to talk about the paranormal things. I'm willing to talk about the UFOs and the cattle mutilations and the crop circles. I mean, I'm looking at the science behind all of this, as well as how does that relate to what we have been told in Scripture is going to happen, especially in a generation that we are living in today. And I feel like we are that final generation.
That's okay. That's a lot to take in, but there's a lot to consider there. We'll do that. We got to jump into a break. We're talking to Dr. Joye. It's Dr. Joye, DrJoye.com. We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com is the place to follow along. Look for April 25th. You see I'm talking to Dr. Joye, and she had a lot to say in there about what the basis for the ideas that we'll continue to discuss here as she's here. And I appreciate the way you put it. You know, the big takeaway for me in what you're saying is that it's a personal experience, it's a passion thing for you, it's about truth, and it's about showing people that, you know, hey, this is what I have experienced, this is what I'm seeing, this is how it adds up for me, and you're putting your money where your mouth is, as it were, by putting it down in print. It's something that I talk about on the show a lot, and it's one of the reasons that I like doing the show and I like doing it live, and it is because I can talk about these things, but I don't have to be 100% right. I can just question, and I can just play and have a little bit of fun and get my information as I do. Whereas if, you know, when I stop and I write, when I do an article, when I start to put these ideas down in a more permanent space, as it were, everything's permanent now because it's all recorded, but it's got to be taken to another level. It has to be right. It has to be accurate. And the places where it's you stating something versus facts showing something have to be real clear and separated. And I respect that you spent the time, you spent a lifetime doing that to be able to take and put the things down in writing that you're talking about, and that it's important to you in that sense, that it's core to who you are, because I think that's the message for people who have any message for other people or think that they do, is that it oftentimes is core. It is important to who they are. And a lot of times people in a position like yours, someone who is uber busy, uber intelligent, and looking at all of these different things, it can be hard to take the time to really sit and produce the work, and then follow up, and also to be successful at promoting it and making it come full circle, and making a living out of the thing. If you go to Dr. Joye, DrJoye.com, you can see what Dr. Joye is about. You can follow along with where she's at, what she's doing, what she's talking about. And also, there's the link that I've shared at towardanarchy.com. It's a longer link, but it's there. You just look for April 25th, and it'll take you directly to her books. And you can support her by purchasing one of these books that we're talking about. And we will come back here after this very short break at the top of the hour, and we will talk about the Shroud, and we will talk about UFOs and Disclosure, and whatever else comes up with Dr. Joye. And we are off into hour number 2. If you go to towardanarchy.com, you can follow along. Look for April 25th. You'll see I'm talking to Dr. Joye, and we're having a great conversation. We're covering a lot of topics, but I definitely want to cover specifically a couple of things. One, we have to finish the conversation about the Shroud and where that led to, and then we have to get into some UFOs while we have her here and are able to pick her brain about these things. And hopefully she will enjoy the conversation enough that she'll agree to come back sometime. We'll talk about some of these other things, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. You were telling me about the Shroud. You've had all these experiences following it around the world, as it were, in its journeys and studying it. And so at some point, this is the thing that struck me, was this idea of taking the DNA from the thing and cloning it and turning it into. And the first thing that pops into my brain is this image of sort of producing the Antichrist. And so is that what you come across then? Is that what somebody is trying to do?
Well, I think I probably was the first person that I have ever read about it back in those days when I first started writing about this, about anything about cloning, because, cloning was considered one of those scientific things that was almost an impossibility. It was almost like science fiction. But I had done the research and had found that the first things that were cloned were frogs back in the 1800s, and a lot of things have been done, unfortunately, in what I call the black market, underground, and private laboratories and things of that nature. And so you had to do a lot of really researching to find what all were they cloning, how good had they gotten at it, what was Hitler doing, what was his capability to make twins, how his people mingle in them. We're looking at making twins and how to artificially inseminate women so that they produce twins. I mean, there was a lot of research that went into finding the scientific roadmap on how we could get to a time period that we live in now, that we could actually clone a human being and that they would be able to live and breathe and walk and be among us, but yet they would look like us, but we're not of us, something that Scripture tells us. And so when I went back and began really looking at the Shroud, the Shroud itself, I guess between 1969 and 1977 is when the most actually serious scientific research began on that Shroud. And during 1978, there was a group called the Shroud of Turin Research Project, and they shorten it to say STURP, S-T-U-R-P, and I usually call it the STURP Committee. That's when they began testing to find out and prove its authenticity. And so when they did, I found out that they had taken some of the blood from the Shroud and that it had been tested in some different places, and they had found that it was human and had X and Y chromosomes, and confirming that it was a male, and they'd isolated 700 base pairs of the DNA. And I thought, wow, this was all before anybody was talking about cloning or doing anything, and I'm thinking to myself, that's pretty interesting that they already have this idea that they want to know more about what's going on. And like I say, the forensics of it, I mean, there's blood samples there on the Shroud actually have tested positive for albumin, bilirubin, protein, hemin. And interesting enough, the bilirubin is a bile pigment that the human body produces when it actually goes through extreme trauma. So when I first saw the Shroud, the blood that was there was very bright on the Shroud, the pictures and everything. Of course, now they have it in a glass case, and it's really more gray looking. But at the time, it was very red, and people were like, oh, well, that's got to be painted. But you have to understand that when blood is filled with bilirubin, from induced trauma to a body, it makes it remain red. So, the fact is that the blood itself showed that it was from a traumatic experience. Well, a lot of people have tried to say, well, it was painted and it was this and it was other blood and all these other kinds of things. And each one of the things I would go back and I would research, how long has it been known that it's been there? What was that? And forensic science, if we found somebody dead, what would this mean? I went through every aspect of it, including the limestone that was found on his feet, that it went back into the Jerusalem area, and that the scientists were saying that the blood was like an AB type, unusual AB type blood. I mean, there's all these things. And then I had heard that they tried to make the shroud like it was not going to be the real thing, but yet when you cross-reference it to the face napkin there in Oviedo, Spain, it's the same blood. Everything's the same, identical. So where the shroud was pulled through history, it was cloth of the destined, moved through history. It was actually under the Knights Templar is who actually carried it through history for us a little bit, and some of the kings like King Umberto of Italy is who actually bequeathed it to the Pope. And the popes have just, recent years. In fact, Pope John Paul II is the one that it was actually bequeathed to when Umberto passed away. So it only came in the hands of Catholics within that length of time. Well, what happened is during that time, the blood samples had already been taken, and there was human DNA that was removed from one of the Stirrup Committee researchers, and it specifically says in the research that he did that it was absolutely cloned. So I'm like, we already cloned it. And when you clone something of that nature, I mean, we're talking about that was already done. So it's one of those things that I've always been looking for the Antichrist. I also always believe that because of the dream I had that we're living in the last days, and so the man of perdition is someone that I have tried to look for, and I wanted to look at Scripture and determine exactly what was it in Scripture that was telling us to be most cautious of. And I found it very interesting that in the book of John that Jesus actually answered the Jews, and when he was going to be actually crucified, he told them, he said, "Destroy this temple, in 3 days I'll raise it up." And those Jews actually said, this is impossible. 46 years was this temple in building, and how are you going to repair it and rear it up in 3 days? But he was speaking of his body. So when he raised his body from the dead, he raised his temple. And so when you go back and you look at Thessalonians and you see when the Apostle John really was writing about that there would be a person coming and emulating God to be cautious of, because even Jesus himself was saying, you better be careful. There's going to be people saying that Jesus is here and Jesus is there. But I found it interesting that John actually wrote, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there are falling away. The man of sin will be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalteth himself above all that's called God, or that is worshipped, so that he," you're talking about the Antichrist, "as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Well, everybody's always said that Antichrist would walk into the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and that he would walk in and stop the sacrifices and that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, isn't it interesting in Scripture that Jesus himself called his body a temple, and then John, in the book of Thessalonians, then Apostle Paul wrote that Antichrist is going to be sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Gotcha.
So I was like, well, if it's not about the temple, and in many scriptures it talks about that, our bodies are like in the temple, shaped in the temple of God, and I go through research about that. But the thing about it is, if that's the case, then how would you create a quasi form of life that would be significant that you could have alive? Well, guess what? When I did research into the book of Revelation, and the Apostle John, who wrote the book of Revelation there, was given the information by God, that he absolutely said about the beast, it was called an image. Well, interesting enough, in the Greek icon, he could have chosen 3 different words, but he chose the word icon. Right. So this being, or this beast, is going to be in an iconic image. Well, who would be iconic back in those days but Jesus? Because you can go back to the monastery there that's at Mount Sinai, and of course the paintings were of Jesus and of Mary. Well, that painting that's of Jesus is there looks just like the Holy Shroud of Turin. So if that's the case, then he would have been the iconic image that John the Revelator would have been trying to say something about. And I just think it's interesting that Jesus himself said, you're going to think it's Jesus here and Jesus there. Well, no other historical group of people ever in the human history could have ever had a time when we scientifically could take that blood, and we've already, like I'm already telling you, has already been cloned.
Yeah.
If you take just one cell off of you and I, skin cell, it is a holographic us. That's what people don't understand. There's holographic you on every skin cell. So if I take a skin cell of me and I take a woman's egg and I get all the DNA out of it, scrape it out, pop my skin cell in, and I electrify it. That's when the sperm hits the egg, you get that electrification. Well, we have to kind of manipulate that. So in other words, it's not like a soul's going in there with the egg and sperm like God created. But we can manipulate it enough that we can electrify that and put it back in a woman. And in 9 months, when she delivers that baby, it's not going to have a thing to do with her. It's going to be me in the flesh, not a twin. Is absolutely my flesh. In other words, if I had to have a heart transplant, if I had to have a trachea replaced, if I had to have an eyeball, they could take it out of that clone and put it in me, and I would never have to take any type of rejection medicine because it is my DNA. So that is a real indicator, I think, that we need to be paying attention to what Scripture says. And look at it as what is it literally saying, not what we thought years ago it might be saying. Yeah. What is it literally scientifically
Well, it's interesting that you
us?
say that, because I'm not a huge Bible guy, but even I understand that basic concept of the body and the temple and that idea and the way that Jesus spoke of it. So that's something that's not even going to be missed by me. It's an amazing connection that you've made there, and it's fascinating to think. And you follow those threads in your books?
Oh, yes. In my book, Eating the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666 is a volume 1 and 2. There is another series, Beguiled, Eden to Armageddon, volume 1, 2, and 3, and then Antichrist, the cloned image of Jesus Christ. All of those books have this information in it because I felt like it was that important. I mean, I felt like that the science is that important. It's growing. The amount of research is just increasing on that shroud. Yeah. And literally, there's nothing that I personally have seen that tells me that that shroud is not authentic. It's just that it's not time to reveal that it is. But they're going to reveal it because they're going to use that shroud to prove the man is who he says he is.
Well, okay,
so it's
there you
coming
go.
Down
yeah,
to that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh well,
it's
I'm
just
Jesus.
not time.
I'm the guy. I've come back. Oh, and look, here's how you can prove it. Here's some of my blood from before. Okay, yeah, all right. You know what? I hate to drop the topic, but I absolutely want to talk some about the UFOs and disclosure because it's a big thing, and they're all related, and we can always come and go from any of this stuff, but it's something that I've been talking about because I keep seeing it in the news and it keeps popping up. It happened just today or just yesterday that was it the Chinese Space Agency or somebody said something about can prove that the contact has been made, intelligent life is out there. So I saw it literally moments just before the show. And so I wasn't able to follow up on it, but there's been this Harvard professor and all these mainstream news stories about these about the potential for some of this debris or whatever that's around out in space to have been actual spacecraft that were left here for whatever reason. There's this Israeli head of security or something like that that's come out and said that it's just all over in your face month after month. And then there's the president, the previous president, having made some edict or so that there's supposed to be full disclosure by all the departments. I don't know the level of it. Hopefully you know some more about that and can just kind of fill in some of those gaps in some of those areas.
Well, it's very true that we're getting to the point that there's going to have to be some announcement made. And I've been following the UFO phenomenon. In fact, I wrote about the first UFO that I ever saw in a book that I wrote about my early life, called Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm, where I actually saw my first UFO when I was 8 years old on the back of riding the back of a motorcycle with my father. And the thing about it is, over the numbers of years, because of my interest in this, I have seen many, many UFOs. And they are something that I can honestly tell you are not really of this world. I can't really tell you what they are, but let me just say, if it was the Chinese or the Russians that would only have the capability of above what I believe the United States may have a capability, they would have already taken over the world. And if we had that capability, we would be ruling the world. There would not be any negotiations going on between China and Russia. We would own them because of the technology that I've seen actually in the skies with my own eyes. And the fact that I have seen and witnessed these things and done a lot of case studies with people who have actually had experiences with these little gray beings that I will honestly say from the research I truly believe are fallen angels, and I do believe they're demonic, and I do believe that there is an agenda. The thing that's most interesting to me, and one of the things in doing the research and doing consultation with people and consulting, is that the people who really typically actually have the experiences will tell you about the sulfuric smell that they have. And now with the release of a lot of the information in regard to what the Army, Navy, and other branches of our military have released, we find that a lot of them are seen around anything that's volcanic. And most interesting, especially with the Navy, is the amount of them that are actually coming out of the bottom parts of our oceans and coming up. If we don't release something, or if our government does not release something, I mean, it's getting too close to, we've got so much capability now with our video cameras, with our pixels, with our ability to see into different spectrums. And the thing that's most interesting to me is now that we have the capability to kind of see into infrared and levels of purple. See, our eyes can only see a certain level. So there's things all around us that we can't really see. You bend light, sure, and you can be standing right on the other side of that light and you can't see it. So what we're finding out is in this violet light, you really can see these things flying around. I mean, anybody that wants to go out and spend 4 or 5 hours at night. I mean, I've done this for years and years and years to watch the skies, to watch these things. They will drop into our atmosphere. You will see kind of a little explosion, which you would think would be like a meteorite. The problem is once it kind of lights up, then it takes off and kind of goes to the right, and it might go to the left, and then back up. So not a meteorite. Right. And it's high, and it's doing zigzags, and it goes faster than a person could even physically in our bodies we could withstand. The things that I've seen move, there's no way that a human being is inside of that. So there's just all kinds of aspects of intelligent people. I've never used drugs. I don't drink. I have 20/20 vision. I'm a Christian. When I say I see something, I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw. There's not anything that I'm trying to make you like me more, or I'm going to get on CNN and talk about it. I'm just going to say, these are the things that I've seen, and this is what it can do. In fact, my next-door neighbor, who is a real good friend of mine, she'll laugh and say, I think if one laid down right out there in your yard, you'd be out inspecting it. And I said, yes, I would. I said, in fact, I saw something one morning going to a church, and I was having to play the piano. And so I was supposed to be there at a certain time, and I saw it on the steel. I saw this silver metallic thing, and I'm thinking, that's never been there. I mean, I'm very, I guess I have a keen eyesight for things that stand out and that are unusual. And so I went on to church. It worried me because I was like, oh, my gosh. When I got back, I drove across this huge field to find that somebody had put up a windmill. And the sun was rising and hitting that windmill and reflecting it. So it's, I know that there are things that can look like something's not right, but I'm the kind of person, if I don't think it's right, I'm going to try to figure out, did I see this? What did I see? What was it? Can I coordinate it with something else, maybe in MUFON's data bank for that same day, same time, same height? I mean, anybody who has these experiences the things that they need to write down are the date, the time, what the atmosphere was like. Was it windy? Where was the wind coming out of? What was the craft? What did it look like? Did you have any effect from it? You just need to write down everything that you can think of, because what happens if you will turn it in to MUFON, which is a mutual UFO network, you go in on the computer, you put that in there, and then you just type in. You don't have to disclose who you are or anything about it, but what it does, it lets you coordinate if there's been UFOs seen in areas across the country.
In a certain area, and you can confirm for yourself if somebody else has seen it. Hold that thought. We'll be right back with Dr. Joye. Go there and look for April 25th, and you will see everything that we've been talking about. You can find on Dr. Joye's website, drjoye.com, drjoye.com, and also at thwartanarchy.com under April 25th. You'll find the link to purchase her books. You can get there from her website as well. And support her, read these things that we've been talking about. I was worried that in the short amount of time that it really provides us, it's amazing when you do this, when you live minute to minute like this, how quickly a minute goes by, let alone the sort of hour or a little less than that of conversation that we actually get to have. I was a little worried that we wouldn't hit on any of those important points, but the fact is that the couple of things that we wanted to talk about, I'm really happy with everything that you've said and everything that you've talked about, because it's really similar to my own understanding of things without having spent the quality time, as it were, trying to follow up on them and understand them as you have, and that includes just a little bit about the UFOs and my own understanding of the way I've experienced it myself. On at least one occasion, sort of the ball of light changing direction, and because it was at night, there's no way that I could tell exactly where it was at. It could have been right in front of me. It could have been off on the horizon. There was just no way to tell. And it's so I've seen with these, and I know you can look up in the sky, and you mentioned that about you spend the time up there at night, and I've talked about this on the show before. And you can it kind of looks like there's a space battle going up there at times, and it's a greater conversation than we will ever have the time for. But I appreciate you taking the time, Dr. Joye, and I hope that you'll come back and talk to us again, too, as well, because there's just so much more that we can talk about.
Well, these books took sometimes 7 years to write. It's hard to talk about them in an hour. So I would love to come back and share with you even more about my research. Like I say, I've enjoyed today. And like I say, if anybody has a question, they can always send me a little submission form there at my website, and I'll be glad to answer their questions.
No, that's great, and it's always wonderful when somebody is accessible and eager to talk about their thing. I find it weird and a little bit off-putting when somebody has a thing and they say that they want to share it, and then they don't come and they won't share it. And so it's great to get a chance to talk to you, and someone so bright and happy and just enjoying what it is you do and doing it with purpose and reason. It's a lot of what I do with the whole show in general, and just trying to show smart people, driven people, artistic people, that they can take their work, their interest, their thing, and turn it into something, and they can even make a little bit of money on it, maybe even survive on it, and influence some people and change some lives.
Well, it's like I say, it's my intent that you really understand why you're here. We're not here just thrown in a situation. We are here with everything has a rhyme and reason, and my research shows you that you are a purpose and you have a purpose, and hopefully I help you find that purpose before you check out.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, because my audience will understand that too. They get the time thing. In fact, one of my guests here not so long ago was a couple of ladies, one that my wife used to work with, who are they're death doulas. They're helping people usher in death and understand that and that transition and whatever, And it's not about particular religions or beliefs or anything like that. It's about the human understanding.
If you can get the grasp of why we are what we are, then anything that happens in your lifetime, you have a greater understanding of what the purpose was and why. And to me, it's more important about your soul and what you want for your soul. But if you don't understand it and you don't have the knowledge, then you suffer because of lack of knowledge, and Scripture tells us that. So hopefully I have been able to put together in these books the knowledge that you need that will help you make the right decisions in your life. and then you can find that purpose of why you are here and why you need to keep, your life in a certain level or order or whatever to get you to that next level. And it's real important. It's really important to see the whole picture, and that's why it took so much research. But, I've done the research for you. All you have to do is read it. I've done the research, and I think that and the scriptures, the Bible, is one of the most important things. It's a manual that the Creator gave us, and there is absolutely nothing in Scripture that is not 100% accurate. I have found nothing that's not totally accurate.
That's an amazing statement. Thank you so much, Dr. Joye. It's been a pleasure, and we'll talk to you again soon. I'll be back on Toward Anarchy. Okay, all you have to do is point your browser to towardanarchy.com to follow along. And as always, I provide the links there. If you just look for April 25th, there's a link to Dr. Joye's website, as well as a direct link to a spot to purchase books from her. And it's drjoye.com, drjoye.com. What a great conversation, huh? I just the whole all of it, just the little bit of UFO stuff that we even touched on there. There's so much more of it. It's just a great conversation. It's not something that I get to do. I don't know anybody else who is really having that conversation. That was always my problem before. Talking with somebody who is more knowledgeable about it than I am, that I can compare notes with, and it was a great conversation. I can't wait to share the archive on that one when this is all posted and just popping it out there across all the different platforms. And that's where you come in. You have to like, share, follow, subscribe wherever you're at, whatever platform you're listening on, wherever you're finding the links. If I'm sharing them, if it's on Facebook or Twitter or Float or Minds or wherever it happens to be, please just take that second. Like, share, follow, subscribe, do that. I had been sort of neglecting my YouTube people there for a couple of weeks. I just was in this work. It was simply that. There's nothing about it any more than that. It was just work. I was just busy, and so it kept me a little bit distracted. But if you are one of the YouTube people, then you probably already know that in the last week I've dropped 3 shows up there, so making up for it. That's it. I'm thinking about you. You're a small but very valued group. I just love the whole building the audience and knowing that people are actually listening, and there's some person that's hearing that on YouTube in the future, and they're going, "Hey, that's me." That's just what I was talking earlier. This is one of the links that I shared there. If you look for April 25th at towardanarchy.com, there's that link about racism that pushed Tina Turner and other black artists out of America. And it's just a really great article from PBS. And in that article, it was neat. I did not know. They just talk about some of these other black artists, and they step back a number of years. I mean, Tina Turner, she's in her 70s now, and so she's been around for a while. But they went back and looking at these black artists and their failures in America to attract an audience, and how they were successful, hugely successful going overseas. And one of the things that Tina Turner had mentioned is this notion that they tell her she's a star, she's a superstar in America, and she says, yeah, but not as big as Madonna. In Europe, I'm as big as Madonna. In Europe, I'm as big as in the rest of the world, I'm as big as the Rolling Stones in some places, and that's a big, bold statement right there. But she's just an amazing artist, and it just blows my mind because I never ever once considered that. I don't, as a music person, that's why I shared the link with you, because it hits home with me. It's an interest of mine. That's one of the things that's been great about being back here in my room, in my studio, because there's so much more room, and there's actually much more studio, as it were. It's back in my space, and I can move around. I was not able to move around in some of my space there, but one of the things is I have my guitar here. Yeah, and so during the break, I could grab my guitar and play my silly little notes, and I don't know, it's just great being back in my space. But that being a music guy and liking music and all aspects of it and being interested in, get a little juice. The Tina Turner thing's always great. Anytime you see Tina Turner's name pop up, because she's a huge star, screen, albums. And in a group previous to that, and that's why she's being inducted into the Hall of Fame again later this year. And again, I mean, that in and of itself is something that doesn't happen to a lot of people. There are a few, like your Phil Collins, your Genesis, and the individual. There'll be people like that along the way, but a black woman involved in Ike Turner, and then as a solo artist to be inducted both times. That's pretty amazing. That's a big deal. And it just never, for me, it was always about music. I never cared from a time as small as far back as I can remember, as small as I was. Music. It was all around me, wherever it was, whether it was in church or whether it was in the car or whether it was on my little radio cassette player, whatever it was all around me. And it was all different types of music, because Grandma listened to classical music. That was all she ever listened to. So I got my Bach and my Beethoven and my Mozart and all of the standards, most definitely, as well as some others like Roger Whittaker and people like that, and some Tom Jones and some stuff like that I would have probably never otherwise been. Well, I guess Tom Jones is pretty popular, but Roger Whittaker, unless you're from Europe, you probably don't even know who I'm talking about. But an amazing artist. And then my mother was, when I was growing up, when I was a child, she listened to rock and roll music. She listened to Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, The Who. I remember all of that in the car. And then at some point in my early preteen years, 12, she married my stepfather, Tracy, and she started listening to country music, so there was that influence there too. And by the time I hit that age, 12, 13 or so, I started listening to, I'd grown up on the Pink Floyds and the Led Zeppelin, so I was listening to the metal at the time that was coming out. Not so much of the punk. It took a little while longer before I was able to absorb some punk and things. But I had to find my way back to punk through rap and metal. I had to work my way backward to it, as some people do, and find any joy in any of it. So this article with Tina Turner, it was great just seeing them and then talking about going back on these different, going back in time and seeing how it really was about them just being black and it just being a predominantly white society and everything predominantly white run, and it still is to some point, or at this point for a lot of America, and it's interesting. It's funny going back and forth in the article, because you know me, I understand the economics of it, and I get that you go where your economics drives you to go, especially with your talent and things. You're going to follow the money if it follows your talent, and so it makes perfect sense. And so what I never got any sense of out of it was them complaining about the fact that they had to do this, but them relishing in the fact that they did it. and went away. And Eartha Kitt was one of the people that they mentioned in there, and that's, you know, Batman being my favorite superhero, all that good stuff. I know the name Eartha Kitt. I'm not a huge fan of that original Batman. The Adam West Batman, that comical, farcical Batman. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I've seen it, and I know who Eartha Kitt is. And I didn't realize that she got blackballed because she was invited by Lady Bird Johnson to speak at some gathering at the White House, and she was to talk about, oh gosh, I don't remember what it was, but instead she showed up and talked about the plight of young black men in America, and at any rate, all of a sudden she's on CIA watch list, and they're running background checks on her, and it ultimately chased her out. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about that story, and just another great thing to be able to share with you, just a little taste of something different, that the whole UFO thing and the Shroud, and just a little bit something different other than just this constant barrage of the state and anti-state and this kind of, because you might get that impression if you hear the show, because the conversation will often lead back there. Especially if it's somebody like Bradley Thomas or Michael Howell or some of these other activists and people who are out there talking about these things. So we don't get enough of this other stuff. There's other, and you might get the impression that all I do is spend my time going, ooh, the state, ooh, this. I mean, in a sense, I kind of do, but the rest of the time, I just spend my life living my life. I spend my time with my family, and I watch TV, and I play video games, and I play my guitar, and I don't read enough comic books. I should read some more, considering I own a comic book shop, but it slows things down a little bit. If I'm sitting somewhere and there's nothing I can do with my time, I can pull up my phone and I can read some comics on my phone. That's about all I get anymore. I get to see the beautiful pictures and enjoy. Well, no, there's no profit. That's not a concern. That hasn't happened yet. It's putting money out into the store. That's all that's happened at this point. You've heard some of the stories. You can follow along. Speaking of geek stuff, Mortal Kombat hit this week. It came out on HBO Max, and it hit theaters. I don't think it'll probably do real well. The word on the story and everything, it's similar to my own impression of it, I guess. That it's just not anything new. The core story of a lot of the characters has been told and retold throughout various versions of the TV series, web series, and the two movies before, as well as the video games. If you follow along the games, the stories continue. And so there's nothing new really in that sense. It's Mortal Kombat. They get a fight to defend Earth. It's down to the last match. If they lose, then Outworld takes over and invades Earth, and they have to stop Shao Kahn, and it's all these fighters from around the world. And so none of that has changed. So what you're looking for going in to this story, or at least what I'm looking for going into this story, is good fight scenes. And I guess when it comes down to it, technology. We're talking about Mortal Kombat, so one of the big things is this is what happened for me in the story, and I liken it to It. If you watch the original It, Stephen King, It, if you watch that original and then you watch the new two movies that came out, if you watch them, they're exactly the same, except for one of them is a TV series and the other one is rated R. That's it. They're exactly the same. And now just take a horror movie on TV and turn it into rated R, and you know what the difference is if you haven't seen one or the other. You get what is lacking or is in place of in the other. And so I got that same impression for Mortal Kombat, was that it's just a retelling of all these stories, except that the first Mortal Kombat was PG-13, and while it had some great, the multi-level fight scene between Johnny Cage and Scorpion in Scorpion's Zone, that is one of the great all-time karate fight scenes, and it's so short, but it's one of the great ones for sure. And so it had to be. This new movie ends up being just a halfway decent karate fight movie with those kills, the fatalities added in there with that rated R addition to things where heads are splitting open. But if you're familiar with the game, Kung Lao is a main character in the game, and he's a main character in the movie, and one of his great moves is this thing where he splits a character completely in half. He splits his enemy completely in half, and at one point in the movie he gets to do that, and they didn't have that. So the closest they had was the soul sucking by Shang Tsung. The evil wizard Shang Tsung sucks the soul out of his victims after they've been defeated, or if in the case of the original movie, if they wouldn't kill the opponent, he'd come up and suck their soul and do it themselves to prove that this is Mortal Kombat. This is combat to the death. It's still none of that, any of that changed. You just had that addition of the gore. So if you don't mind the gore and you want to see those fatalities that have become so famous in the game come to life on the screen like they never were before in the original movies, then you're going to love this movie and it will be just fine. I think you will. I thought it was just fine, and that was it. It was just fine. I wasn't blown away by it. If it were the first Mortal Kombat movie, I might have been blown away by it, but I've already experienced Mortal Kombat coming into this, and being someone who's played the games, not religiously by any means. I really haven't played since the third one, so even then the fatalities have become so much better. The video, the games, the resolution, all of that, has become so much tighter, so much better over the years than it ever was when I was a Mortal Kombat player. I've just played with it a little bit here and there. I own 10 because of some of the characters, DC characters that came with it. I specifically wanted to have that. But other than that, I haven't really played it. And back at 3, I was one of those guys that could hit all of those patterns, and just with a couple of characters. I couldn't do it with any of those characters today. We'll come back and we'll wrap it up here on Toward Anarchy. Do me the honor of take a moment of your time to like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening to the show on. I know there's a lot of places where you can find the show. Take a moment. If you're listening live stream over the network, support the network, support the advertisers. You have no, if you just catch my show on a stream, you may not know. The network is amazing. There's so much more to offer across the entirety of the network. There's so many different conversations going on. They're all in the range of things that I'm talking about for sure, the things that I'm bringing you, because they're the type of conversations that we're all it seems that we're all interested in. I don't find anybody that doesn't want to talk about these things. Sometimes they want to argue about them, but everybody wants to talk about them a little bit. So the best thing you can do is share and support us across the board, the network, the show, just the like and the share, the subscribe, if it's on Facebook or Twitter, wherever it's at. Those all make a difference, because it all just helps increase the reach. And if you can, if it's within your ability to do so, support the network financially. Buy a T-shirt from me. It helps pay for the website and the little. I just love my little lock up there. I never had that before. I've been building websites for years, and I never bought a security certificate and never made it. I'm doing the quotes thing, secure to surf the pages, and it's just really cool. It's one of my favorite things to see. I'm so proud of it and so happy about it. But it costs money, and so every shirt helps take a little bit of that away, but just that, what really matters, that like, that share, that follow, and that subscribe, because those are the real things that we can look at and say people are listening. And that's the most important thing to us, is that people are listening, that they're hearing the messages, and that that they're taking that they believe the messages, and that they think that they're important enough that they will take the time, even just the few seconds that it takes to like, share, follow, subscribe, do that thing. It makes all the difference in the world. And we continue to just do what we do and bring you these wonderful conversations. I'm so glad that Dr. Joy reached out to me about coming on the show and talking about those things, and I will definitely have her back on here, because it's not about agreeing with every single thing a person says. It's about the information. It's about that seed. She mentioned it when she was talking about it, and I talk about it all the time, and it's a thing that anybody who does what we do it talks about and mentions, and that's planting that seed. And so that's what we do every week, and we'll be back to do it again next week. Until then, you take care.